Thank you guys so much for 1,000 subscribers. It's absolutely amazing. I still remember making and posting my first video and anxiously telling only a couple of my friends that night. We've come so far and it's all thanks to you guys. I haven't quite thought of what I'll do for the subscriber special, so if you have any ideas, please let me know. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Darren, a first year medical student studying at Monash University here in Melbourne, Australia. Victoria is in lockdown number 6, which means that the GAT has been delayed yet again. Now, I believe the date that you guys are sitting the GAT is now the 12th of August. To help you guys prepare, I've decided to make a 2-video series, and in the first video, which is this one, I'll be talking about my preparation for the GAT and also the first 2 writing tasks using a past GAT as an example. And in the second video, I'll be talking about the multiple choice questions. I'll be doing them and also my exam technique for the GAT. Now, my scores improved drastically from year 11 to year 12. In year 11, I performed quite poorly, but in year 12, I did quite well, and you can see my scores right now. By the way, I did have a video earlier in the year talking about the GAT, so please go give that a watch. These videos will be in more detail and they're also closer to the GAT as well. Today's video will be split into 3 sections. In the first section, I'll be talking about how I prepared for it and also why I prepared for it. And in the second section, I'll be talking about writing task 1, and in the third section, I'll be breaking down writing task 2. Enjoy. First up, how I prepared for the GAT and also why I prepared for it. Now, the GAT is usually taken quite lightly. You have the GAT phrase, you have the GAT memes, and in year 11, I didn't treat it that seriously either. I watched one video on it and then I sat it, and I didn't do that well. I scored high 30s, low 40s, which is quite poor comparing to how I should go in considering like my subjects and how I did at school. Now, in year 12, I took it more seriously for the same reason which you guys are probably watching this video and taking it more seriously, which is because of COVID and lockdown. A lot of teachers were saying that the GAT might be used more than in previous years because it's supposedly a measure of your innate intelligence rather than something that you can train. So it's meant to, level the playing field a little bit. And so I placed more emphasis on it. And we'll go into my preparation now. With the writing tasks, what I did was I talked to my teacher about it. So one of my English teachers, my Eng Lang teacher, was a past GAT assessor, and he sort of spoke to me a bit about how to structure a good piece and how to write a good piece, which I will talk to you guys about in the following sections. And in terms of the multiple choice sections, I did an entire practice GAT. I don't remember which one it was, but I did the multiple choice questions. So I didn't sit down and do it all in one sitting. What I did was I spaced it out over a bit more than a week. So I did, 15 or 16 questions, and there are 120 multiple choice questions in total. Now, what's really useful is that my school had videos with worked solutions. So after a set of questions, either all of them, which I did in a day, or whether they were all related to one prompt, I'd check the answers and see what sort of thinking led to the correct answer. And oftentimes when I got the wrong answer, and even when I got the right answer, I'd find that sometimes the thinking was much simpler and there was always a quick way to do things. Like the multiple choice questions don't take as long as advertised. And I'll be talking about this more in my second video, and you guys see how I tackle questions in action. And this form of preparation really helped me, I thought, get a really good grasp of the GAT. They say you can't really prepare for it, but for me that wasn't true. Both ways, 1, I could prepare for it, and 2, a little preparation goes a long way. So apart from really figuring out tactics for the writing task and also thinking more smartly about the multiple choice questions, another thing that helped was sitting down and thinking about how I would actually tackle the GAT. And I'll go into my exam technique in the next video. But before that video comes out, I really encourage you guys to think about, what style do you reckon you should take this exam? Do you rush the writing tasks and then do multiple choice and make sure you get each question right because they're each worth 1 mark? Or do you start off with multiple choice, rush through them quickly, and then spend more time in the writing because there's more room to do well? I'll leave you guys to have a think about that, and I'll explain that all in the next video. So in summary, the way I prepared for the GAT was 1, think about what the examiners would be looking for in the writing sections. I didn't write any essays in preparation for the GAT. I just thought about what would make a good essay and what those sections are testing. 2, doing the entire multiple choice of an exam and checking the solutions carefully and seeing how to do the questions. And 3, thinking about how I would take the exam as a whole. And I will go into this in my next video and show you how I sort of balanced up different pros and cons and ultimately came up with my way of doing it. Now let's have a look at the writing tasks, beginning with writing task 1. This general achievement test is the 2017 one. I didn't pick one of the recent ones because I've either done them before because I was in VCE, or I did them as practice, or you guys might want to do them as well. So let's have a look at writing task 1. With this task, the way it works is you're given a bunch of information in the form of statistics, quotes, images, and your job is to synthesize them. What that means is you try and present the information in a very smooth way. I think an excellent essay for this section means that the examiner forgets about your job. They forget that what you had to do was have all these various disparate pieces of information, had to piece them together. And for the examiner, it felt like reading it was just one fluid essay, and the pieces of evidence were really smoothly integrated. Now the way to do this is that you arrange each, you group the images or the statistics, you group some of them together under a certain theme, and then you arrange those themes in a fluid way and have a logical progression of those themes. So let's have a look at how you do that. So I'd go through each piece of evidence and think about what it appeals to and see if it resonates with any other piece of evidence. So let's have a look. Here, Popular Legend Cafe Melbourne looks like it's about popularity and culture. And Australia. Or in Australia. Alright, this one here, the suspense is almost unbearable. No coffee. So importance of coffee even during the war. Here, what do we have? We have sort of the biological origins of coffee, the beans, so biological origins. So the beans and export. Already I can see that this importance of coffee here can be tied maybe into the popularity of coffee in Australia. Alright, coffee, history, cultivation, trade. So first off, we have the biggest importing regions, coffee cultivation, and we also have this little history as well. And I think I might be able to tie this importing regions with this exporters, because importing, exporting is very linked. Alright, this quote here, smell of coffee. Okay, once again it's a cultural and popularity. Cultural and popularity. Cultural and popular, the icon. So coffee has really big significance, and here we have it in everyday life in a book, and up here we have it in war, which I think we can tie those two together possibly. Here, consumption, importing, exporting are quite linked. This is about Australia, which is something to note. Consumers, once again, I can tie that into importing, exporting. So perhaps importing and exporting. And this seems to be about the process of making coffee. And that reminds me of this image here, where we get from plants to beans. And here, process of coffee. And it looks like I can tie it into here, because this is the final product, or different places where caffeine is also used. And here we have found in 60 plant species, immediately plant. I just think of that picture of the plant. So plant. Finally, coffee in Australia, nice timeline. This has the theme of Australia in it, and also the theme of a timeline. So the way with timelines, they're really good. And one way to really nicely use them is sometimes your other pieces of evidence slot in at different moments. So you might have an image that relates to here, a statistic that relates to here, a quote that relates to here, and you can bunch those together. It doesn't really seem to be the case here in this prompt, but in other places this might be useful. For here, what I think is quite nice is I can compare it to the European one. So we have a European timeline here, and we have an Australian timeline here, which we can compare. So now let's have a look at how we can piece all this together. What I'll be doing is using different colors and circling the prompts that I'll be using. So we have various themes running around in our heads right now. We have popularity, we have the origins of coffee, both in terms of like countries and also biologically. Now, I don't think popularity is a good place to start because you sort of build up to it in the end, and this is what I mean by having a fluid structure that flows really well. I think a good place to start would be just biological origins. So that's the plants. I'll be using this, sort of setting the background. I'll be using this. And is there anything else I can use? And I think I'll use this as well. I'll talk about how, it can be derived in these ways, and it can be used in not just coffee, but in a variety of popular drinks. Right. Moving on to the next point. Let's have a look what we can use. Yeah, in the next point, I think I'll talk about the importing and exporting. And just the countries around the world that import and export a lot. So I'll say like coffee has a really global impact. As you can see from here, it's the biggest importing regions. I won't circle the whole graph. Exporting here, and should I use consumption here? I might use consumption as well. I'll show that it's really been consumed a lot. I'll probably save it for Australia. I'm thinking doing worldwide first. So I'll do the top consumers, importers, exporters. Nice. Alright, thirdly, what I want to do is I want to talk a bit about the progression. So using the timeline a little. And what I want to talk about first is the beginnings of coffee. And here I will use this part here, sort of just the early parts. It's not like I'm not really cutting it off here, but just the earlier parts of Australia. And I think I'll compare it to this European. And from what I'm reading here, it began a lot later in Australia than in Europe. And I think that is a good segue from up here, because I can acknowledge that in Australia it's not as popular. I'll just write this in blue. So Australia, not as popular because we're not a top 5 candidate. And I can acknowledge why that is, because it began a lot later in Australia. Australia was not colonized until quite recently. And I think that's quite a nice tie from this paragraph to this paragraph. And let's see, what else can I use for beginnings of coffee? Use this part, I'll use that part, which is nice. Is there anything else? No. Actually, looking back, I could probably use this with this biological origin. So how do you actually make coffee? I can insert this grinding, roasting, transforming. You get these products. So this all fits really well. So let's have a look at what we've got left in terms of stuff we haven't covered. We've got this tea and consumption in Australia. What I wanted to use this to do was to highlight the increasing popularity of coffee. And we have this quote here. I'll use a different, we'll just use red, doesn't matter. We have this part here, which is also about popularity. And probably this last part here, and this last part here. Actually, no. Yeah, and this last part here. And if you haven't guessed already, what that last thing will be is popularity. So we'll use a different color. What's a good color to use? We'll use pink. For current or just popularity of coffee. And here is where I tie in, the quotes. Australia's recent development in terms of both the timeline, recent, spurt, and both in terms of the timeline and also the graph, where the amount of coffee compared to tea grows a lot. And see, I think this is quite a nice way of structuring things. Popularity is nice because it's current, and I can sort of make a comment about how coffee will continue to grow in the future in my conclusion. And biological origins is just a good solid start. It really just dives into the nitty gritty and gets that out of the way first. And yeah, so it flows quite well. And hopefully that's helped you guys in terms of how to structure and think about a writing task 1 section. Just a disclaimer for writing task 1, you don't actually have to use every single piece of evidence. It's more important that you integrate everything smoothly. So with my piece of writing, there may be places that I won't be able to integrate. So I won't be able to integrate every single part of that timeline in, but it's okay because what they're checking for is smoothness of your logic, rather than you just trying to shove everything in. So don't get too paranoid over that. Now let's have a look at writing task 2. With writing task 2, you have much more scope for your own opinion and to be a bit more philosophical with your discussions. So you're given a bunch of prompts and your choice is to use one or more of these statements. So the only scenario where I'd actually use more than one of these statements is if they're closely related to each other, because I feel like it's just too hard to get two pieces of opposing information together, and you don't get marked better if you use more of the prompts. And so let's have a look at the prompts. Most communications these days is just meaningless noise. That seems like a decent prompt. That's what I'm thinking when I'm reading it. The ability to communicate meaningfully is what separates humans from other animals. I mean, I don't like this prompt that much because it sort of forces you to compare humans and animals, and I don't feel like that's a really interesting essay. I'd rather explore communication by itself. We are lucky to live in a world where there are many tools. I quite like this one. It's a good topic. The way we communicate determines the quality of our lives. This topic is really nice sounding, but I would argue that it's a bit difficult. It's something that we can discuss and talk about, but I think it's a bit hard for me to find substantial paragraphs and have a back and forth and have a rebuttal and have good discussion in this topic. It's just a bit hard, especially within the time constraints of the GAT. One more thing to note is that I might not explicitly say these sentences in my piece. I don't think it's necessary, and don't do it as your first sentence because probably a lot of people do that. But I'd probably use keywords like lucky, world, communicate, which makes it pretty evident what my topic is. I think these prompts are meant to give you a gist of things rather than you have to incorporate it word for word into your piece. So, looks to me like we're going with this one. It does take me a while. I remember for my actual GAT, I narrowed it down to about 2 topics in reading time, and when I began writing time, I had to make a decision. So it does take a little bit for you to pick what you'd like to talk about. So let's have a discussion about this one. What's important here is not to try and sound too fancy, not to try and sound philosophical or to sound like you're some kind of philosopher. What's important here is that you have really substantial arguments that are thought-provoking and not fluffy. So we're lucky to live in a world where there are many tools to help us communicate with one another. So one body paragraph is just, evidently so. Evidently. So in the past, we didn't have these tools. If people left, say friends leave overseas, family, of course it's you'd be unable to contact them because of a lack of tools available. And 2, I would acknowledge how much the tools have helped us. So, and I'd probably define what these tools are. So these are things like phones, laptops, social media, like Discord, Instagram, all that kind of thing. And what these tools have done, they haven't just given us contact with our family and communication with our family, but also with celebrities as well. So, not just close contact, communication. So you can see what any of your favorite celebrities are up to, any of your favorite singers, your YouTubers, you can see what they're up to through these tools. And now I think a really good point is lucky, right? there's a really important point to tackle. Are we lucky? And there are, of course, bad sides to this. So social media, oftentimes we compare with others, we communicate with others. Actually, no, I don't think that's a topic here. So it's important not to drift from topic either. I think the time we spend in this sort of communication, and I can define communication as seeing what other people are up to, so just scrolling through Instagram, I think that counts as communication, often causes us to detract from what's immediately around us. So, so many tools, the number of tools, the masses of tools available, and I wouldn't use tools so much because it's not a really nice sounding word. The massive tools available and their scope cause us to sometimes distracts us from communication with those right around us. And I think that's an important point and a really interesting one to bring up, and I think you have a lot to say here. So you see people choosing to communicate with their favorite celebrities, choosing to communicate with their friends at the dinner table rather than, with their family. And I don't really think that's a good thing because I think the enabling aspect of these tools is not something that should take over your immediate communication and your face-to-face communication. It should be there to complement it when you can't access the person that like you previously could, like your friends, your grandparents, whatever. I think it can be used as a complement, but it shouldn't replace your immediate connections that you have. So overall, I think you should have a thought on this, have thoughts on this. What's your contention? Now I'll get rid of this. And my contention here is that we are lucky to have it because it gives us the potential. It gives us the potential to communicate with people, which is something very rare. But then again, it's really up to us to control it. So we're lucky because we have the ability to, but at the same time, ability, responsibility, the classic quote, power and responsibility. We also have the responsibility to use it appropriately, and so that it actually helps us rather than causes us to lose things that are important to us. So lucky to have it, but also have a responsibility. Have a responsibility to manage it appropriately. Alright, so I think that's a good discussion of the topic. It gives you a couple body paragraphs and you'd write your intro and your conclusion. So as you can see with this, it's quite a broad discussion. It tackles different areas of the topic and it all leads towards my ultimate conclusion. So it's a discussion of the different sides and ultimately my viewpoint on the topic. And that's what's important with this topic. Being able to think widely and have substantial points to contribute, but also having your ultimate opinion, weighing up the sides and providing them with what you think in the end, because it's your point of view in a reasonable and convincing way. It can't be reasonable without arguments and tossing up both sides. And convincing, I guess, if your whole essay is working towards it, then that makes it quite convincing. So that's it for the second writing essay task. Thank you guys for tuning into today's video. If you have any questions about my preparation or the two writing tasks, leave them in the comments below. Look out for my next video where I'll talk about my exam tactics and also I'll be doing some multiple choice questions. Good luck for your preparation. I know lockdown is quite difficult. I hope online school is going well. Try and pay attention. I also have a video on how to do better in online school, so check that out if you need some help with that. But otherwise, try and get through this week. Hopefully our cases go down, lockdown isn't extended, and good luck for all your preparation. See you all next time.